Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Rich Hall. He is a certified exit planning advisor and author of the Exit Planning Journey. Thank you for being here today, Rich.
Hey, glad to be here, Ron. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, so we were chatting beforehand, laughing and cutting it up, but now it's time to get to work. So let's tell people kind of who you are, give them a little bit of orientation of where you, what I should say, I guess, origin story. Tell people kind of where you come from, how you ended up being a certified exit planner, and let's set the foundation for this conversation.
Yeah, let's do it. So, probably not too hard to tell. I've got a little bit of an accent. So, I'm originally from outside of the Atlanta, Georgia area and have traveled a good bit most of my career, lived outside of Georgia, currently in Houston, Texas. But most of my career, even out of college, was in some form of a turnaround situation or rapid growth. And I'll give you an example. My very first management job was two or three investors bought a small company and said, Rich, we need you to come in here and help turn this thing around. We want to go IPO in 9 months, IPO or a merger acquisition in 9 months or less. Now, how's that? You can't even sell a company in that time frame. 9 months later, man, we had it ready, passed a VC audit, and boom, I ended up with 12 locations and traveling 90% of the time. So most of my career has been that way in some form or fashion, working with companies either as an employee or all the way up as an executive. And my last go was brought in as a turnaround president of a multinational, multi-generational family-owned business. And at the end of the very first year, record profits, record revenue. So, but at that point, I said, you know what? I really enjoy the challenge of helping companies get from where they are today, wherever that is, into a position that says, hey, we're a highly profitable company and highly valuable. But I wanted to do that for myself so I could help multiple companies. I became a business advisor and had my clients. And then magically, a wealth advisor I know that runs a wealth advisory firm called me up and he said, Rich, you got to explore this exit planning stuff, specifically this certified exit planning, or we call it a CEPA designation, because he said, we have a lot of business clients or business owners that are clients that at some point in time are going to want to have some kind of transition, but we don't know anyone that can really speak the same language and go in there and help. And I investigated to see, because what's another certification, right? If it's not really, helpful. And what I found out was there's quite a few people today that have this certification, but very few that are more on the very upfront, working 2 to 3 years in advance with the company. So that's what I do in a nutshell today, and absolutely love it. And, we're changing people's lives.
I've seen some of those, and I've considered going down that path. The expense of their training and taking the test isn't much. A couple grand. Let's just say $2 to $5,000, somewhere in that range. So it's not a monetary thing. It's just I work mostly on the side of helping people grow through acquisition, and acquire things. I love meeting new business owners, hearing their story, building rapport, getting to that point where we set up great rapport with a business owner maybe all the way through the LOI, and they start to get the due diligence, and then I want to talk to the next new, business owner and understand what they built in their story. And I was a marketing coach for a long time, and the reason I'm telling you this whole story is, how do you get people to actually do the actions? Because as a marketing coach, I would work with small business owners who wanted to grow, and my job was to grow myself out of a job as a marketing coach,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that they would come to me if they couldn't afford an internal marketing team, right? And I would help grow them until that point where they could. So they would come to me when
Mm-hmm.
they're, $100,000-$200,000 a year, and it just didn't make sense to bring a full time guy on. I would give them a step by step plan, and more often than not, they would call me up and go, "Hey, this isn't working." I was like, "Cool. Did you do step one?" And they're like, "Well, not exactly as you defined," or they'll say, "Yeah, I did step one." I was like, "Cool. Did you do step two?" Well, not exactly. And they just, you had to like force the issue or do it for them. And it got really frustrating. That said, how do you get people in this exit planning process to understand that here's step one, here's the action items you got to get, call me, or, how do you get them to actually do the stuff?
Man, absolutely great question. And I'll even take you a little bit pre to that
Mm-hmm.
because, number one, as we know, the buyers today are much more sophisticated than the sellers. And
Right.
the buyers are really just trying to understand, yeah, I want to buy a business, but I got to get through all of the noise and all the financials and everything to get a true image and a true picture of what it is. And is it something that makes sense for me to purchase based on the price and the risk involved and everything else? So the way that I try to form it up with the business owner is, number one, you got to get to them in advance. Because the entire ecosystem today, as we know, points the seller directly to the transaction. Oh, Mr. Skelton, you're interested in selling your business at some point. Well, come on over. Let me introduce you to a broker, banker, whatever, because that's what they do and that's where they make their money at. Okay. Well, when I talk with business owners, I'll ask them, well, look around your house. Would you take your house as is today and put it on the market immediately and expect to get top dollar for it? And obviously the answer is no. But what I've found is most business owners have no idea the difference between an income generating business and a valuable business. And I talk a lot with business owners where they're like, Rich, what do you mean my business won't sell? This thing's generating $1 million a month, EBITDA. I said, hold on for a second. Are you able to take 3 weeks of vacation time as a business owner? How much of your revenue is coming from what percentage of your client base? If you're greater than 20% by, one or two, customers, that ain't going to sell. So when you start walking through and explain it to them in terms that they understand, now the light bulb clicks and they flip the dynamic over and say, oh, okay, I really do need to look at this thing as an asset. And that's when we start having much better conversations. And the other, for example, when I go through my work initially, we don't even talk about the business until probably the second or third meeting. Everything up front is, all right, what are your personal goals? What does the next phase look like? Is it retirement? Is it, hey, I want to get out of this one and move on to the next one? I want to take some chips off the table. I want whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's, well, how does that translate to financial goals? And if they got a wealth advisor, we bring them in. If not, we refer them in, and we do a lot of referring to really try to help them better understand the picture. Because once you start getting it personal, it's important. And then the last, we talk to them about what's the goals of the business. Is what happens to the business important to you? I got one client that says, Rich, I've run this company for 20 years. I've got great employees. I know their families. I want to make sure they're taken care of. Okay, there's certain buyers you don't want to sell to because they're going to do a roll up and let go most of your team. So the buyer can dictate how much they pay for it, obviously. I got another client that says, Rich, I run the company for 30 years. I'm 70 years old. I've done very well for my employees, but now it's about me. I want max value. Okay, great. But you can see we hadn't really talked about the business and valuations and assessments or anything up to that point. But what we've done is made it personal for the owner to say, now you're thinking about the next phase, then we can start getting in the business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of cases where the business owner is, all about the employees, the brand, the like legacy they built. And I've seen a few where they like, look, everybody's already retired out of this thing but me. All these employees are new, and I don't even know how to like talk to some of these new guys that are coming in because they're a different generation. He goes, I just
Mm-hmm.
want to sell this and I want to be able to retire comfortably. So I think a lot of it has to do is how long, where they are in stage, how many employees have been there for 10 or 15, 20 years or more, and how much of their
Mm-hmm.
own personal identity have they tied into this business. It's a natural human psychological thing to do. If you ask 100 people, who are you? They'll tell you what they do. Like I'd say 80 to
Yeah.
90% will tell you what they do. They won't say, my name is Ronald Skelton and I have 2 kids and a wife. They go, I run a podcast. I know I asked, who are you? Right. They'll
Yeah.
tell you what they do for a living.
I did. You nailed it, Ron. The identity is spot on.
Yeah.
And even the things like once they see the future that says, you know what, this thing is far enough along, money's not going to be an issue for me.
Hmm.
Then they start thinking, well, wait, I was somebody when I went to work. And I enjoyed seeing people and being part of their lives and making a difference. We talk about that literally a year or two in advance before we ever start selling. Because I get that expectation in their head. Because what'll happen, you'll spend a ton of money getting everything ready. You got attorneys, accountants, all kind of, you got buyers in there. You're going back and forth. And then it's going to hit you hard. You're going to wake up one day, is this really what I want? And so you got to be locked down on that before you go through the process, or you're liable to get it last minute. And we talked beforehand about how you've worked a lot of times with owners and buyers only for them to walk at the last minute because reality wasn't what they expected.
Exactly. And the that deep psychological need is we all have this. Every one of us has a need to feel significant somehow, some way, right? It might be significant
Mhm.
to our kids. That's kind of where I'm at in my life right now. It's like my kids think I'm cool still, so I want to hang out with them, right? And some of them like that sense of where we're significant in the world is through our workplace. And if they're going to
Mhm.
sell or do something, the fastest that way to make sure it does close or anything is figuring out what replaces that. I can tell you right now,
Yep.
you won't feel significant. You won't that sense of importance, like you're important to the world, doesn't come on the golf course. It doesn't come on your
No.
bass boat, right?
Yep.
So you've got to find something else to replace that because a lot of these deals don't close because they're like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do next.
Yeah, it's exactly that's that whole personal thing.
Hmm.
And we have some tools that we help them work with or try to work through it. But I literally had lunch with a business owner yesterday
Hmm.
about some business opportunities that we're talking about. And he had recently exited his. And he's same thing. Rich, I've traveled all I want to travel. Now I wake up every day wondering what am I going to do and what value. And the guy's young enough to really enjoy it.
Hmm.
But now, and there's a stat that says 75% of business owners that exit out of their business regret doing so within the first year. And it's because of the things that either maybe they could have been left too much money. They felt they left money on the table. Their identity, they miss being important or special. They didn't really plan out what the next phase. And tell you what, a lot of people that sell are tired and worn out. I
Hmm.
get it. But how long does playing golf every day last until you get, yeah? Because hey, unless you really make an effort, that golf game is not going to get any better by playing more and more every day. You've really got to make the effort. So guys get bored. Same with travel. So we cover that way up front to set the expectation of what's to come.
I like to tell business owners and anybody out there, I said, you ever work out? They're like, yeah. I said, remember how when you worked out a lot, you're sore the next day? And they go, yeah, I'm sore the next day. I said, that's the same way right now. You say you're tired and burned out. And you want to do something next. That's going to happen. It happens. And then what's going to happen
Mhm.
is that'll go away pretty damn quick once you sell this. that tired and burned out, you're going to get rested, and it's not going to take a year, 2 years, or 3 years. 4 weeks after this thing closes, you're like, I've had all the sleep I want. I've had all the stress reduction I want. I've fished all I want. I've golfed all I want. Now what the hell am I going to do? So,
Yeah.
I always tell people, find something that gives you significance. Usually it's contributing to others. Become a score mentor, right? That ex-business
Hmm.
owners are really great score mentors. They're always looking for those. That'll help you maybe figure out what you want to do next in the business world. Start a little pet project, volunteer at, volunteer centers and other stuff. But contributing to others is the fastest way I know to fill that gap. Whether it's through volunteer organizations and or score or consulting, right? There's a reason why there's a reason why I'm consulting. There's probably a reason why you're consulting, and it's just because it's fun to do. It helps other people, and it kills off that need to like wake up and go, "What the hell am I going to do today?"
Yeah.
So, what are the what is the logical process you walk through a business once they know they want to sell, they want to do an exit plan, succession plan, whatever they want to call it, whatever you want to call it. Kind of what do you prep them? How do you prep them, and what are the steps that they need to go through?
Okay. So, yeah, the very first thing, the thing we have to understand, business owners have a short attention span on longer term projects and all that kind of stuff because they're running the business and they know their business inside and out. So when we go into work with a business owner, we usually have a pretty short projects, about 4 to 6 weeks, and most of the time is tied up to the things they need to do. But for example, when we talked about the first little while ago about the personal, financial, and business goals, that's literally the first thing that we nail down.
Mm-hmm.
In parallel, we're also doing we bring in a third party valuation company under our agreement because we know who they are, what they do. And we also let the owner know that, this is not Rich coming up with numbers trying to tell you what you want to hear so we can get your business. So it's a valid valuation company. And we get that going in parallel because nowadays, as you know, there's a lot of people out there. Hey, come to my website, fill in these numbers, and we'll give you a valuation. That's worth about the amount of money you pay for it. Okay, but business owners that don't know any different, they don't know.
Right.
So while we got that, we go through a very comprehensive 360 assessment of the company. And we break it out in two different areas. One is how attractive the company is to the outside market. And we go through and talk about things like, let's talk about your financials and your profitability. The market you're in, does it have an upside? What's your company's capacity and growth potential? Let's talk about employees, talk about IP, patents, sales processes, marketing, the whole bit. And what we do is we grade each one of those areas. But this isn't hey, let me see this form and you fill it out. It's literally we sit down with them, walk them through each one of the questions because they're walk them through each one of the assessment questions. Because the thing is, they're going to ask me back, well, Rich, how is this relevant? Why is this important? And see, what I'm doing along the way is I'm educating them from the perspective of a buyer. We also do a readiness assessment. How ready are they to transition to another firm? Systems, processes, technology, leadership team, owners' involvement in the business, all of these type things. And then the outcome by this time, we've already gotten a valuation back from the valuation company, and it'll tell us sort of a range where we think it's going to fall in at. Well, usually a lot of times what they'll do is just cut it right down the middle. Okay, and that's right. It's safe. But what we do is we take our scoring of all the comprehensive assessment and layer it on top of the valuation. And we'll tell them, all right, if it'll sell or not, because a lot of times it may not, or if it does, here's where it falls within that range of values. Does that number minus taxes and fees, if they sold it today, equal or exceed their financial goals? If it does, we point them right directly to the sale. And we have a process for that, and we work through with them on that. If not, what we've done is we've identified those areas that need to be looked at and addressed so that we can move the needle enough and get that valuation of the company where it needs to be. And that's again pretty darn quick for a 4 to 6 week project. But then once that's done, they already know there's no surprises. They were involved the whole way. Then we start talking about the next phase, which is, value increase, or you can hear value acceleration or some other terms.
One of the things that kills a company and kills a company's sellability is once they realize they want to exit or have a succession and stuff, they tend to take the foot off the pedal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and like not,
First thing.
yeah, and not many of us want to buy a company that's declining. There's there's probably 100 buyers that want a profitable company for everybody ready and willing to do a turnaround. Right, and that's what we
Mm-hmm.
it may not even be a true turnaround, it just meant a lot of times it looks like it's gonna be a turnaround, and it's just because the owner took their foot off the gas and they're, not doing what they usually do. How do you get people to say, "Look, now's not the time to slow down anything. Now's the time to increase it and show a 10% year over year, or 20% year, or even a 25% year over year growth, because that makes you
Mm-hmm.
attractive to buyers. Now's the time to expand. Now's the time to bring in young talent and get them educated, which is a lot of work. If you think about it, you know, the prepping itself is work, but the fact that the true way to get this business ready is
Mm-hmm.
to fix all the things that you probably been putting off for a while anyway, right? Because you're burned out.
Yeah, that's a hard one because the scenario that I tell them,
Hmm.
if they wake up one morning, they're 65, whatever age, and then they say, man, I'm exhausted, I'm done. Rich, help me sell it for a 10 times multiple. I can't, I can't help them at that point. Nobody can. That's the biggest tragedy because there's not enough time or runway left and they don't have the energy. So part of why I just spread the word and I get it out there as much as possible is we need to work together about 2 to 3 years in advance. And where I tell them at is, save that last sprint, that last piece of energy. Because here's the thing people would say, ask me, well, Rich, why 3 years? As an example. I say, all right, well, let's break it down. 9 to 12 months to sell your business. That's just what the time frame is if you put it on market today. So let's take that off. Now you got 1 to 2 years to effectively make adjustments to the company to get it to a point where it's what's called transferable value. Buyer's going to look at it and say, hey, can I step in and not only run the company and generate profits, but is there enough of an upside? So therefore, you got to have enough time and energy left. And keep in mind, we're also those people who say, oh, you don't have to do all that stuff. Here, let me introduce you to my guy that'll sell it. You spend a ton of money on all the different fees and it doesn't sell.
Right.
So that we do a lot of educating on what the process is and what they need to be aware of so that it is ready when the time is right.
I can tell you, I've often, probably more often than not, if I get a decent rapport about with a seller, if the transaction's not going to go through, I usually write a 2 to 3 page write up. I was like, look, this is what I was looking for and what I didn't find, and here's what any other buyer in my space would look for, and here's why this, if you fix these things, it's usually a detailed write up, like a step by step. If you fix these 10 things, call me. I love who you are. I love what you've done. You're not ready to be marketed for what you think you need, and here's how you get there. Right. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times people will say, like, I don't bring up numbers ever talking to business owners at the beginning, because you just don't know their valuation until you know their business, their culture, so much other stuff that you have to know before you know a business is worth 2 million or 5 million. And that's one of the
Yes.
things I think the valuations. If you bring a guy in and he just does valuations based off of spreadsheets, I think he's making a mistake, because there's a lot of other stuff too. Sometimes cultures are not transferable.
Yes.
I can give you multiple cases where, like, the culture, you would have, there's only one person in a million that can buy the company, because there's only one person in a million that can carry on the culture that everybody there working for him could do, right? and it's usually not a good culture, right?
That's what you described is the whole purpose of why we do such of the in-depth assessment up front,
Hmm.
because it's those things that both drive the highest value for a company, and they're also those things that can kill a deal. And we'll talk through, for example, and I mean, we get real because, I don't want to waste people's time, nor do I want them to waste my time. One of the assessment questions we'll do is how would you rate the culture of the company in some form like that? Owners always, most of the time, go, oh man, we got a great family owned business, family culture and all that kind of stuff. Then what I'll do is I'll have a meeting with the leadership team. And then I'll ask them, well, tell me, what does it take for someone to be successful at this business? And you see the dynamic, then they're like, oh, well, you got to be able to be screamed at. You got to be able to answer phones 24 by 7. Forget having a weekend because you got to come in. That's your real culture. So when I see that, that's when I go back to the owner and said, no, man, we got some work to do. You're not going to get a 6 out of this. I graded on 1 to 6. You're not going to get a 6 on this one. You're going to get maybe a 2.
Yeah.
And that'll really kill you. And then that's what I mean. Once we walk through it, then it's like, oh man, we got work to do. But if we don't get hard and we don't get real on those type things, then you're right. It's going to be guys like you on the back end. You're going to have your list. Well, in essence, I'm doing the same stuff on the front end to make sure that when you walk up and say, yeah, I'm really interested. And guess what? Of my 10, you checked every one of them, man. Let's do this.
I uh, I had a talk with at a particular tree trimming and landscaping company because he was kind of mad at me because I killed off his buyer, and I pulled him aside. And I said, "Here's why," and I told him why. I said, "So you've been working for years in this space. I guarantee you, if you reach out to your network of people, somebody in your space and your culture might be interested in this." And I said, that's where I would start with if I were you. Somebody that knows how
Yeah.
to talk to these people, manages. And he called, he actually sent me a text message and I called him back. About 3, 4 months later, he goes, "Hey, one of the parole officers I've been working forever is wanting to own a business with him and his son. He knows how to handle the people. He's been managing this for years. And his wife's a parole officer too, and it's like we're both going to come in and they're going to come in and buy. They're younger than me. They're going to come in and they're going to take over a piece of it, manage it for a while, and if it works out, they're going to buy the rest." I said, that's the
Mhm.
person you need, right? You need somebody that knows. The one thing that was important to that owner too was that to maintain that culture, to give people who have been in a rough spot a second chance,
Yeah.
to give them a way to earn, a way out of trouble. Because when you can't earn a decent living and you can't go to work every day, then a lot of times the only option now is they end up back where they were in the bad cycles they were in. So it was real
That's
important to
exactly.
him to continue providing jobs to the same cultural people that he was been providing jobs to. I was like, cool, find somebody
Hmm.
that can manage those people, somebody that can has been around it for a while and knows how to speak their language, how to build a culture where they respect them and get things done. And it was a parole
Hmm.
officer, I'm pretty sure. I don't know what the end of the story was, but that's where they were going. So it's
Yeah.
possible. I didn't want to leave that out there that just because you have something that's unique and different doesn't mean there's not a buyer out there for it. But a lot of times, what you do, the work you do, helps them identify. Here's what you've got, right? And if we're going to sell
Yeah.
this, here's who you need to come in and do. You got to change the culture, and the culture only changes. I love what you're talking about from the leader. They said there's an old saying that says fish rot from the head down. Well,
Yeah.
culture and environment and stuff like that and vision and future is changed from the head down too. So if you got two paths, if you've either got a market of people that manage like you to sell to, right, that can step into your culture and be comfortable in it and lead in the culture you've created, or you have to switch the leader out, switch yourself out, put a culture in that the market wants, so you can broaden your buyer pool, and both those take time. So
Yeah.
it takes time to if you got such a unique culture that it takes you have to find the perfect buyer for, that's going to take time. And then if
It's
you
hard.
want to change the culture so you have a broader pool of buyers, that's going to take time. So it's going to be a 2 to 3 year process. And the other thing I think I don't want to skip over is that when I look at something and other buyers look at something, or if I'm looking for something for one of these corporate buyers that I'm working with, we look at 2 to 3 years worth of your financials. So if you've been
Yeah. Oh,
tax
at least.
saving
Yeah.
and all that stuff for the last 4 or 5 years and you've been trying to not pay Uncle Sam any penny you don't have to, and I come in and look at it, you're not gonna get the valuation that you deserve because you've been running
Mhm.
it in operator mode and not running it in value creation mode for selling. So that's
Mhm.
another reason why it's 2 to 3 years is because we're gonna dig back.
Yeah, a lot of so that's one of the top things I work with the owners on pretty quick
Mhm.
because there's a couple of things. Again, they don't. No one's told them, so they don't understand this. When you do evaluation, you're going back at least 3 to 4 years. But here's the thing: it's not the financials that you use day to day to run your business. And that's a bold statement. So let me explain it real quick so the audience understands. Today, the right way is to run your business in such a way that you're able to deduct expenses legally, but also to the point where you can minimize taxes, right? So you have tax strategies and planning. And if it means running some things through the business, and we all know business owners are going to run, trips through it or cars through it or whatever. When you start doing your valuation, though, what you do is you go back and identify those things, the expenses that are not core for running the day to day business. In other words, if a buyer came in, would they spend the same amount of money on those type things? And then what you're doing is you're adding all those up, and they got to be effective or accurate. And then what you're doing is you're adding it back in toward your profits or EBITDA, which will inflate or increase from this view of your financials. That becomes the accurate view of the financials that valuation companies use. So, on the one side, when you talk, again, there's a lot of different approaches, or a lot. There's about 3 to 4 different approaches for evaluating a company: market approach, income approach, etc. The market approach is what most people have heard, a multiple of EBITDA. Business owners, EBITDA, man, they drop their head because, mine stinks. Well, wait a minute. Let's go back and look at it. Let's do an adjusted version, add those stuff back in, and then now that gives you a truer picture. But like you just said, stop doing some of this stuff now because now you're trying to make it more attractive for the buyer. And it's amazing how you'll see the cash flow of the company is much more attractive than what they thought. And it's taken that transition from a lifestyle business, which I think is what you were saying, into a value based business. And that's what we help them understand the difference of.
Eh,
Getting people to change. I got a client that runs all their family members' cars and insurance and cell phone through the business. Then they wonder why their financials look bad. Get that off of the books, for crying out loud. If you
right.
need to adjust salaries or whatever, but get that mess out of there. A buyer doesn't want to see that.
And those are ad backs, and ad backs end up being negotiation topics. So some of them will make it, and sometimes they're like, "You can't do that. Like that has to stay in there." Some of the other things that people don't get is a lot of these. Like I looked at a. I'm still kind of looking at it. We'll see what happens. I looked at a software company with somebody, and they is a bigger company, and they have 10 people making probably 110 to $150,000 a year each in a research and
Mhm.
development project, and have for the last 3 to 5 years, and they haven't added. If you look at, I asked the critical question in there is say, cool, what products or revenue has that research and development added to your company? They haven't had a win in
Mhm.
3 to 5 years, right? They're spending a
Ooh.
million, $2 million a year paying these 10 people to try to come up with new products and kind of come up with new features, and they're flopping left and right. I was like, okay, if you really
Yeah.
want to sell, cut that crap out, put them back to work on, growth and sales and other stuff, and focus on your core business. And that bit goes from, it's just insane when you're like, I'm thinking about selling my company, and I have a group of people spending a million and a half, $2 million a year that just aren't dollar in dollar out. They're not succeeding, right? And it's
Yeah.
things like that. Some people, they have these side projects and pet projects inside of their companies that don't really belong there anymore, right? So a lot of people just don't get it. It wasn't when they sat down to do something. There wasn't a solution. They've been doing it for 10 years, and now there's 5 solutions out there that are more economically viable than what they have, and they need to make those adjustments. So,
All of those things come up. For example, we drill into all of that
hmm
when we're doing the initial assessment
hmm
because systems, technology, processes.
hmm
The buyer already knows that there's going to be 5 or 10 things he can get off the shelf.
yeah,
So he'll look at it and say, all right, well, you got 3 people doing payroll, making 100 grand each. I can buy this product for say 1,000 a month or whatever it is. So I'm going to discount my offer price because of that, because I'm not going to pay and then have to maintain all these people. That's a direct hit to the deal that the owners just don't even think about.
yeah,
And you know, those are some things that you can get into a little bit deeper and say, listen, I know this may be painful, but here's the thing. Over the next 2 years, part of the projects could be a migration from this package to one of those we found on the market. You let go 3 people. Imagine what that does to your numbers and how attractive you're going to be. And we do. We get into all of that because it's the exact same scenario. Otherwise, it's going to be like guys like you on the back end that says, I'm not going to pay that much money for all of that because I know I can get something even better off the shelf.
and a lot of people, well, I don't want to let anybody go. They've been working with me for 5 years or 4 years. Like, you realize that you're going to be doing them a favor when you let them go. They're going to go work for this software company. They're going to find another job, right? And most likely, it's going to be for somebody who has more customers than you have. They're not going to, go to work again. Maybe they would, but most likely they're going to find a job that instead of having one customer, one product, they're going to have going to go to a company that has 1,000 customers, and they're going to be happier and more fulfilled because they've got more engaging work to do. Like, you're not
Mm-hmm.
hurting these people, right? You've just got the wrong button, the
Right.
wrong seat. And for the company I told you had the research and development project, he's at the point where he's probably in that. He could be a 7x. He could be like PE level on his
Yeah.
multiple. Right now, he's running it in a way he's probably going to get 4 or 5, X. I was like, but even if you just say the four, you take $2 million worth that he's wasting on R&D and something that's not producing, and do 4x on it. Do you want the check or not? Because right now you don't get the check. You're wasting the money. It's not on your EBITDA, right?
Yeah.
It's in your expenses for employees. It's in your payroll.
Exactly. Well, and again, when we go in, we go through all of those.
hmm
But here's the other part. We actually also create an action steps for each one of those areas, dragging down the value. So, like you're talking about, if a business owner is not quite ready, it says, Rich, I don't know that I'm ready to initiate a program, for actually selling, but I do love the idea of value creation here. I'm like, hey, the outcome of that initial, I call it the assessment phase, we go through each one of the areas and 4 to 5 bullets. All right, here's what we recommend as next steps, and they can take it and run with it. And a lot of them may file it away and they wonder later why, the value or the income hadn't changed. But what's also cool is when you address things dragging down the value, then because you got your multiple of EBITDA, right? So if you got a low EBITDA, low multiple is not going to sell for much. But as you're addressing things that make it more valuable, what ends up happening is your multiple starts going up. But what else happens? A lot of times, so does your EBITDA go up. And therefore, you have many, many more times of value in the company that you could sell it for. And we'll walk the owners through that type presentation where you're down here, but guess what, man? You do these things, and then naturally your profitability is going to increase. You could go from a value of, say, 5 million to a value of 20 million by doing this type stuff. And what it does is it also creates an ROI for our efforts.
Right.
So we can look at it and say, all right, if you got to spend X amount of dollars, you may have to swap out staff or do some things. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit of pain. But look at here. We can translate that to the impact to the multiple, which in turn will say, spend 100 grand as an example. And guess what? you're going to come back with $1.5 million worth of value.
And as buyers, one of the things we look for are companies that have those easy to pull levers, right? We look for companies that, yeah, they're growing year over year. They're wasting money in certain departments or whatever. They're riding, let's just say they're riding at that line just below where the private equity family office and stuff would be looking at it. So they're in that, small, medium SBA loan realm. Current valuation is
Mm-hmm.
5 million or less. But you look inside it, they're in an industry where the typical industry pulls 20% profit margins and they're running at 8% profit margin because of all this stuff they're doing. And you look at it and go, if I go in there and I run it right, in 18 months, I can cross the threshold to wake up the big boys, right? I can cross that.
Yeah.
I can go from being a $5 million valuation on, a $1.5 million earnings to fixing these things, growing a little bit, and crossing that threshold where the PE dips down and PE pays 5, 6, 7x for these same companies. There's an arbitrage
Yeah.
game that happens in this industry that a lot of people don't know exists, right? And most
Mm-hmm.
industries and like the private equity, wakes up around 4 million EBITDA, and then and then there's another wake up at about $10 million worth of EBITDA that you become interested in strategic, and then very often you can go from a multiple of your mom and pop shop 1.5, 2x, 3x your seller's discretionary earnings, your tax return, uh, to 5, 6, 7x your EBITDA to 10, 20x your EBITDA because now you've got a strategic buyer. You're over $10 million, and you've waken up the big boys, right?
Yeah.
And that's what these guys are trying to do with the roll up. But the right company can do it themselves with a guy like you, or looking at some stuff
Mm-hmm.
and say, where are the levers to pull? Can we pull those in the next 2 to 3 years while you still have energy to do it? And what's the maximum way we can, exit this? The other thing that is cool is sometimes they get all the way there, they've done the work, and they don't wanna sell it anymore, right? It's the old, and I see
Yeah.
the scenario all the time, it's like you take your car, you get it detailed, you think you're gonna want a new car, right? So you're like, "I'm gonna get my car ready for trade-in," or, "I think I want it my house, I think I want a new house, I'm gonna go paint it, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna replace the roof, and I'm gonna build that patio on there because everybody in the neighborhood has a patio." And then when you get all done, you're like, "Hey, this place is pretty nice, and why would I ever sell it?" Same thing happens with some of these businesses. You reduce your time where you don't need to be there, but 3 or 4 hours a week. You got a great general manager in. You're doing back to doing only what you love, talking to customers and doing stuff for 3 or 4, 5, 10 hours a week. You can go on a month vacation and come back, and the company's better off than it was when you were there. A lot of times these guys get to that point and they go, "Why would I ever sell this?" Right? I can semi-retire right now. And it runs.
You're exactly right.
Hmm.
And part of our conversation that we have with them is don't limit your options with your company to just selling.
Hmm.
There are a lot of other ways to fulfill some of those goals. So, like for example, you can sell a portion of it to a management team. You can sell a portion over here. You can do it's called a minority recap,
Hmm.
where a financial firm will come in and say, "Yeah, we'll offer X amount, for debt or a minority equity stake or whatever." Now the owner can take some of that value out of the company, invest it, take it for their retirement, reinvest it in the company or whatever.
Hmm.
And then guess what? Their company, they've already taken chips off the table, but their company is now basically an annuity for them,
Yep.
whereby they'll make a heck of a lot more money doing what we're talking about of, 3 to 4 hours a week than perhaps selling it outright. And again, 90% of owners have no idea what all this means. So we gather whether if it's I'm the right guy or we bring other resources in to talk about when the timing is right or what are the right options for those sellers. And it's not always just flat out, binary buy or sell. There's a lot more options out there.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, even in the space of like an ESOP, that you can actually take a company. I think the ESOPs require more training than most people assume. I think
Training and administration, yes.
training and administration, the employees got to learn how to run a great company. So there are people that are great
Hmm.
at teaching it. There's companies out there who can make a company a great ESOP. I've interviewed them. I know who they are. That said, you bring somebody in that teaches the employees how all the employees need to know if they're going to be an ESOP, they need to know how to read a balance statement. They need to know how to make a sell. They need to how to understand the function and why a company does what it does. You get that down, you don't have to sell the whole thing. A lot of people like that annuity
Yeah.
process you're talking about. You can sell 70% or 80%, and there's such huge tax advantages because all the percentage that goes into ESOP in most states, there's no taxes on that money whatsoever. It's a trust, right? The ESOP
Hmm.
structure is the same legal structure as a trust, right? If you the underlying legal structure of it, so it's a
Right.
tax-free entity. So you're going to save 30 something percent on taxes. So that the it's an incredible avenue that I think that's underutilized, and then you can maintain. There's all kinds of ways to do it. You can actually do warrants. I forgot what it called, but you can own it, keep a stake in it 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever you want,
Yeah.
and that acts as an annuity to your family. You can put that in a trust, and when you're gone, your family still gets a quarterly dividend check from the employees who are running their own business, an ESOP, and it carries on for generations. That's what the big families do. If you look at some of the things like the Hearst, these family offices, just because you don't have 100 million plus dollars doesn't mean you can't run your business like a family office would, right?
Well, and one of our big things we talk with them on is in advance of the sale, you got to do it before the sale, is getting in, for example, depending on the size of the company and how much we're talking about, a certain level of estate planning
Mhm.
attorneys and tax strategists so that you can set up the right kind of trust, the right kind of entities. And I know companies that have looked at it and said, you know what, if I sold it today, I wouldn't get the number I want. So I want to take, a percent out now though, because I
Mhm.
want to take chips off the table so I don't have all my long-term risk in here. And then that second bite of the apple is so much bigger than the first because now the company has grown and etc. There's just an enormous amount of options. And what we do is we always talk about in the back of our minds, prepare for the tax implications. And there's a lot of different ways that business owners are not aware of.
Mhm.
And there's also tiers, as you know, tiers of tax strategies and attorneys that, based on the amount of wealth we're talking about, can set up structures so that you still have money and you've minimized your taxes, but you're also protecting yourself further from things like very large estate taxes.
Mm.
And the worst thing is not having any of this in place. Sell a company because the second that check hits you, Uncle Sam's got 40%. Never ever. We don't dare let that happen. So we literally will recommend the right kind of resource. We'll sit down with them as well to
Right.
make sure the owner understands what's actually going on to minimize taxes legally as much as possible.
And a lot of people don't understand that, depending on where you're living, a lot of times that resource needs to be somebody specialized in your area. This state, California, is extremely
Oh,
harsh on taxes, and there's
yeah.
some programs that if you find the proper California tax strategy attorney who understands mergers and acquisitions, there's programs and ways to mitigate some of that here. I interviewed one a long
Yes.
time ago here, and he only does California because California is so unique that when you sell a company here, you can get burned pretty harder than most states, or
Mhm.
there's certain programs and certain ways to structure it where you can minimize some of that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, using advisors like you and other people that go, you know what, you're in so and so state. We need to get somebody local to you that knows this. Let me call around and figure out who's going to come in and help you keep as much of your money as you earned it. You worked for 30 years in this company building it. Let's do our best to keep as much as that going to you as possible is something most business owners can't do on their own, right? It's just
No. Well, and yeah, you nailed it, Ron. Because guys like you and I, we're in this world every day.
mhm,
And we've established a network of people throughout the sort of, as I call it, exit planning journey that, depending on the circumstance, will be the right resource to come in. Whereas left to their own knowledge, business owners, again, oh, you're interested in selling your, I got this great attorney. The guy may have been a who knows, family law attorney, and you want them to transact your corporate entity? No. So there's so many specialty areas that we have networks around so that we make sure we always bring in the right ones to help.
Oh, they wouldn't like me. I'm not afraid to say anything to anybody. I've had more than one conversation with an attorney. I call them like, where even if I'm an advisor on the deal and I'll call up either party's attorney, the seller or the buyer's attorney, and go, "What in the hell are you doing? You have no business in this deal. How dare you? I'm a past attorney from this state." Yeah, you're a divorce attorney. You don't know
Right.
mergers and acquisitions. This is a very unique beast, and you're not doing this guy any service whatsoever. You're more likely to kill this deal than you are to help it. And
Yes.
it I honestly think, like, I think it's an ethics I'll even say it, I think this is an ethics violation, and if we go much further in this and I get really interested in it, I might just call your state bar and ask them the same question. Is this an ethics violation for a divorce attorney to take on a mergers and acquisitions deal when he doesn't know the field at all? And that wakes up people pretty quick. I'm not afraid to say anything to anybody, and it's not out of meanness or spite. I think it's just out of doing the right thing for everybody, all the parties involved in it. That's one of my pet peeves. If somebody comes into a
Okay.
deal and they're going to hurt it more than they're going to help it, they're not helping that. I don't. You call this guy your friend, right? Well, it's my buddy's business. I got it. Do your buddy a favor and get the hell out of the way because you're not the right guy for this job,
Not
right?
the right person. Yeah. I my clients are very personal
Hmm.
to me, and they trust me implicitly,
Hmm.
and therefore they know that I've got their best interest. And if I'm concerned or not quite sure, I haven't met this particular resource. Again, could be a wealth advisor, could be an estate planning attorney, a tax attorney, whatever throughout the ecosystem. I'll sit down with them, whether it's in person or a Zoom call, and participate in the call to make sure that the right questions are asked and that the client's best interests are represented. And because these meetings really have a tendency to divert and go into different areas, because when certain people may smell money, oh, there's a transaction ahead. Oh, I've got a great wealth advisor as part of my firm. No, this wealth advisor is already working with the client. Thank you very much, but we already have that resource. I make sure and shut that stuff down
Yeah.
because our team of professionals, like you and I have talked about, we vetted them, they're core, and we're going to do the absolute best to represent that seller in the best way possible.
And a lot of people don't get that. Even a certified financial advisor, there's so many flavors of that you could be a certified financial advisor and not be the right guy to ever look at an M&A deal. You may not know anything about minimizing tax impact, maximizing, the owner's realization of of income from this transaction. But you're great at picking stocks. You're great at picking mutual funds. You're great at setting up annuities, right? I wouldn't like. We have a family attorney that manages the trust for us, and everybody in the family talks, head over heels about this individual, and they handle all the financials and all the stuff for the family trust. That's awesome. But when I sell a company, I don't call them. Now I just found out one of my wife's cousins is a high ranked mergers and acquisitions attorney in San Francisco, so I'm going to have a meeting with her, right? Because that's a different person. But the person that you know manages the stock portfolio for the long-term investments is not the same person, even though they're a certified financial advisor and happen to have passed the bar because they're a lawyer too. That doesn't make them the right person to take a look at this. This is
It's exactly
this is a very unique thing to happen. It has very unique rules, laws, and tax implications by the decision you make. And finding specialists like it's like I tell people, would you go to a proctologist to have your LASIK done? Wrong end. I was like, don't go to your
right.
financial advisor to talk about tax implications of an M&A deal. It's the wrong end of the deal, right? He's trying to show you how to maximize income or money that you have and grow it, and you're trying to minimize what you give to the IRS, right? In a legal and,
Hmm.
and safe, structured way. So don't go to a specialist who's focused on the wrong end of the deal. So
Yep.
I appreciate it, man. Tell me a little bit about how people reach out to you if they want to work with you, if they want to sell their company. What is the best way to contact you?
I tell you, the absolute best is go and hit my website
Hmm.
for the reason a lot of what we talked about here. I wrote a document we mentioned earlier called the Exit Planning Journey. And it goes into detail as to what takes place the 3 years in advance, but also what does the sale process look like. And a lot of business owners, a lot of advisors in the ecosystem have really enjoyed walking through that
Hmm.
to really give a good picture of what the total is. My email address is on there. LinkedIn is also a good way. It's all off the website. So I would say hit the website. It's richhallgroup.com. And would love to meet and have a conversation and see if we can help somebody.
Awesome. I'll put all that stuff that I have. I'll have your LinkedIn address, the website, and everything in the show notes too. So if you're driving on the road, listen to the podcast, don't stop and try to write a note. Just go to the show notes. I'll have links in there for you to click on. Thank
Yep.
you for being here today, and I think we'll wrap this up and call it a show.
Absolutely enjoyed it, Ron. Take care. Look forward to round two.
I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between $5 million and $30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.